Imagine living in a town where the past refuses to stay in the past, where segregation still lingers, and racial discrimination is a daily reality. What if your chances of getting a job, a home, or even fair treatment depended on the color of your skin? Today, we're exposing 10 towns in America where racism isn't just a shadow of history, it's alive and thriving in 2025. Some of these places still have KKK activity, shocking racial income gaps, and police systems rigged against Black residents. Think you know the worst one? Number 10. Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi. Home to nearly 150,000 residents, with an overwhelming 82% African American population. But despite its vibrant Black culture, Jackson remains one of the most racially divided cities in America. Historically, segregation laws kept Black residents in poverty, and even today, economic gaps are staggering. The median household income for Black families is $28,500, while white families earn $66,400. That's more than double the earnings. Unemployment is also strikingly disproportionate, with Black residents facing a 15% unemployment rate, compared to just 4% for white residents. Education? That's another battlefield. Nearly 60% of Black students attend schools that receive $5,700 less per student than predominantly white districts. The dropout rate among Black students is 23% higher than the state average. Even worse, Jackson schools have one of the lowest ACT scores in the nation, averaging 16.4 out of 36, making it incredibly difficult for Black students to compete for top colleges. Healthcare is no better. The infant mortality rate for Black babies in Jackson is 11.9 per 1,000 births, compared to just 4.3 per 1,000 for white babies. Many Black residents live in healthcare deserts, meaning they have to travel over 20 miles just to see a primary doctor. With systemic neglect, police misconduct, and minimal job opportunities, Jackson remains trapped in a cycle of inequality that dates back to Jim Crow laws and urban disinvestment. Number 9. St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis is a city of contrasts. It's home to the famous Gateway Arch, bustling sports culture, and the notorious racial divide that runs through Delmar Boulevard. Back in 1916, racial zoning laws made it illegal for Black families to live in white neighborhoods. Today, segregation is still deeply ingrained. North Street. Louis is 95% Black, while South St. Louis is 85% white. White families earn an average of $73,500 per year, while Black families make just $26,500, less than half. One of the biggest crises? Housing discrimination. St. Louis has one of the highest Black eviction rates in America, with 1 in 7 Black families facing eviction every year. Unfair lending practices ensure that Black homeownership remains at 32%, while white homeownership is 74%. A stark contrast. Education in Black communities is another issue. North Street Louis A schools have a graduation rate of 67%, compared to 95% in white areas. Public schools in predominantly Black areas receive $8,000 less per student than majority white schools. And college? Only 12% of Black Street Louis residents have a bachelor's degree, compared to 48% of white residents. Healthcare is another crisis. The Black infant mortality rate is 3 times higher than the white rate, and Black residents have an average life expectancy of 66 years, compared to 78 years for white residents. St. Louis may have abolished segregation laws on paper, but the reality tells a very different story. Number 8. Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham was the battleground of the civil rights movement, where Martin Luther King Jr. led protests against segregation in the 1960s. But decades later, the city remains one of the most racially unequal places in America. With a population of 197,000, the city is 69% Black, yet wealth and power remain in white hands. White families earn an average of $80,500 per year, while Black families make just $31,200, less than 40% of white income. Education inequality is brutal. The dropout rate for Black students is 22% higher than white students, and 70% of Black schools lack basic resources like up-to-date textbooks and functioning air conditioning. Schools in white neighborhoods receive $9,200 more in funding per student compared to black schools. The ACT scores among black students average 17.1, while white students score an average of 24.3. Birmingham's racial segregation can also be seen in housing. White homeownership is at 76%, while black homeownership sits at just 39%, one of the lowest rates in the U.S. Many black residents live in former red line districts where property values are 45% lower than white neighborhoods. Healthcare access is a crisis. Black residents have twice the rate of untreated chronic illnesses due to the lack of black-owned hospitals and medical facilities. Infant mortality among black babies is 14 per 1,000 births, one of the highest rates in the country. And let's not forget policing. Black residents are 7 times more likely to be stopped by police than white residents. Despite its historic role in fighting segregation, Birmingham still grapples with deep racial disparities. Number 7. Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, once the Motor City, now a city struggling with economic and racial divides. In 1950, the city was 83% white, but due to white flight and deindustrialization, the demographics have flipped. Today, 79% of Detroit's residents are black. Yet they control less than 10% of the city's wealth. The median income for black households is $30,000, while white households make $68,000, a $38,000 gap. The city's housing crisis is devastating. More than 45% of black Detroiters rent their homes, and eviction rates for black families are 3 times higher than white families. Home loans are given twice as often to white applicants, despite black residents making up the majority of Detroit's population. Education is in crisis mode. Detroit public schools are among the worst funded in the country, with per-student funding $7,400 lower than the national average. Only 17% of black students graduate high school on time, and college enrollment is under 14%. Black teachers make up only 9% of educators, despite serving a mostly black student body. Healthcare is another disaster. More than 40% of black Detroiters live in a healthcare desert, where hospitals have closed down and clinics are overcrowded. Black infant mortality rates are 13 per 1,000 births, more than twice the national average. Detroit also has one of the highest black unemployment rates in the U.S., hovering at 17%, compared to 5% for white residents. Once a beacon of black prosperity, Detroit has been abandoned by industry, stripped of resources, and left to fight a battle against systemic racism. Number 6. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio is a city that was once an industrial powerhouse but now stands as one of the most racially segregated cities in the U.S. With a population of 368,000, about 48% of residents are black. Yet economic opportunities remain heavily skewed in favor of white residents. The median income for white families in Cleveland is $62,700, while black families make just $29,000, a shocking 54% gap. Black unemployment is 12.3%, while white unemployment sits at just 4.5%. Housing discrimination is severe. Homeownership among black Clevelanders is at 35% compared to 72% for white residents. Redlining maps from the 1930s still shape property values today, with predominantly black neighborhoods having home values 42% lower than those in white areas. Black families are also twice as likely to be denied a mortgage compared to white applicants, even with similar credit scores. Education is another crisis. Cleveland's public schools are among the bottom 10% in the nation for funding, receiving $7,800 less per student than the Ohio average. The high school graduation rate for black students is just 67%, compared to 92% for white students. College attendance among black Clevelanders is 21%, while 53% of white residents hold a bachelor's degree or higher. Healthcare disparities are equally alarming. The average life expectancy for black residents in Cleveland is 72 years, compared to 79 years for white residents. Infant mortality for black babies is 14 per 1,000 births, nearly triple the rate of white infants. Cleveland's racial struggles aren't new. They're the direct result of decades of urban neglect, systemic racism, and policies that continue to disproportionately harm Black communities. Number 5. Boston, Massachusetts. Boston, Massachusetts often markets itself as one of the most progressive cities in America, but ask Black residents, and they'll tell you a different story. Despite being home to world-class universities like Harvard and MIT, Boston has a reputation for racial hostility, especially toward its 24% Black population. In 2017, a study found that the median net worth of Black families in Boston was just $8. Yes, $8. While white families had a net worth of $247,500. Fast forward to 2025, and that number has barely improved, with Black wealth still hovering below $1,000 in most cases. Income disparities are severe. The median annual salary for Black Bostonians is $36,000, while white residents earn $87,000, a 141% difference. Unemployment among Black Bostonians is 11.2% compared to 3.9% among white residents. Many Black workers are pushed into lower-wage service jobs, while white Bostonians dominate corporate and tech industries. Education follows the same pattern. While 76% of white students in Boston go to college, only 22% of Black students do. Public schools in Black neighborhoods receive $9,500 less per student than majority white schools, leading to an achievement gap of 31% between Black and white students. Even though Boston is home to some of the best universities in the world, Black residents are largely locked out of these opportunities. Healthcare isn't much better. Black Bostonians have a 20% higher rate of chronic illnesses, and maternal mortality among Black women is 4 times higher than that of white women. The average Black resident in Boston has a life expectancy 6 years shorter than their white counterparts. Despite its progressive image, Boston remains one of the hardest places for Black residents to thrive. Number 4. Springfield, Ohio. Springfield, Ohio might not be a household name, but in 2025, it has gained notoriety as a growing hub for white supremacist activity. The city has a population of 58,000, with 15% Black residents, yet racial hostility is rampant. Over the past 2 years, hate crimes have increased by 32%, largely fueled by the presence of extremist groups that distribute propaganda and hold rallies. Economically, Springfield is a disaster for Black residents. The median Black household income is just $24,800, while white families make an average of $65,000, a 62% difference. Black unemployment is at 14.5%, compared to just 3.8% for white residents. Many Black residents struggle to find stable employment, as major industries prioritize white workers for higher-paying positions. Housing discrimination is another major problem. Black homeownership in Springfield sits at 28%, while white homeownership is at 74%. Predatory lenders often target Black buyers with high-interest loans, and eviction rates for Black renters are 3 times higher than for white renters. Springfield's Black communities also face severe underfunding, with roads, public transportation, and utilities often neglected. The education gap is alarming. Black students have a graduation rate of just 64%, while white students graduate at 92%. Schools in Black neighborhoods receive $6,700 less in funding per student, and many Black students face racial bias from teachers, leading to higher suspension rates and lower academic performance. Healthcare access is just as grim. There is only one Black primary care doctor serving the entire Black community, and hospitals have been repeatedly called out for racial disparities in treatment. Black residents in Springfield have an average life expectancy of 68 years, while white residents live to 76 years. Springfield might seem like a small town, but its deep racial issues make it one of the most hostile places for Black Americans in 2025. The rise of white nationalist groups, combined with systemic neglect, keeps Black residents trapped in a cycle of economic and social oppression. Number 3. Maysville, Kentucky. Maysville, Kentucky, a town of 8,800 residents, might seem like a peaceful riverside getaway, but it has become infamous for something far more sinister: its connection to white supremacist groups. In 2025, Maysville made national headlines after it was discovered that a Ku Klux Klan faction was using the local post office as a national headquarters, distributing hate-filled flyers to surrounding states. Though the town itself is 84% white and only 11% black, racial tensions have been brewing for years. Economically, Maysville is a town of two realities. The median income for white families is $62,000, while black families struggle with an average of $27,500, a 56% gap. Black unemployment is 13.8%, more than triple the rate for white residents. Many black residents report being turned away from jobs, especially in management and public sector positions. Education tells a similar story. Maysville's predominantly black schools receive $5,600 less per student than white majority schools. The graduation rate for black students is just 68%, compared to 96% for white students. White students in Maysville are 4 times more likely to take advanced placement, AP courses, than black students, limiting opportunities for college admissions. Housing discrimination is blatant. While 74% of white residents own homes, only 26% of black families are homeowners. Black applicants are twice as likely to be denied home loans, and rental discrimination is widespread, with black tenants often forced into poorly maintained housing. Racial profiling is also a significant issue. Black residents are 5 times more likely to be stopped by police, and hate crimes in the area have risen 31% since 2024. While the town's officials claim they are cracking down on racial tensions, Maysville remains a stronghold for racial discrimination in Kentucky. Number 2. Lexington, Mississippi. Lexington, Mississippi is a small town of just 1,600 people. But don't let its size fool you. This place has been described as a modern-day Jim Crow town. In 2024, a Justice Department investigation uncovered systemic racial discrimination within the local police force. Black residents, who make up 86% of the town's population, were being disproportionately arrested, fined, and even assaulted by law enforcement. Shocking reports revealed that black drivers were 7 times more likely to be pulled over than white drivers. The town's economy is a disaster for black residents. The median household income for black families is $21,300, while white families earn an average of $52,500, a 59% income gap. Black unemployment is 17.4%, the highest in the state, and opportunities for black-owned businesses are nearly non-existent. In fact, only 6% of Lexington's businesses are black-owned, despite the majority black population. Education is another area where black residents are left behind. Public schools in black neighborhoods receive $6,800 less per student compared to predominantly white schools in surrounding areas. Only 64% of black students graduate high school, and college enrollment is under 10%. Many black students report racial bias from teachers and administrators, leading to higher suspension rates and fewer academic opportunities. Healthcare access is equally dire. Lexington has only one medical clinic, which often lacks the resources to treat chronic illnesses common among black residents. The black infant mortality rate is 14.2 per 1,000 births, compared to 5.3 per 1,000 for white infants. Many black residents have to travel 30 miles or more just to receive proper medical care. Lexington remains one of the most racially hostile towns in America, with black residents facing discrimination in nearly every aspect of life. Number 1. Harrison, Arkansas. Harrison, Arkansas is often referred to as the most racist town in America, and unfortunately, that title still holds in 2025. With a population of 13,000, Harrison is 94% white and only 1.3% black, a stark contrast that didn't happen by accident. The town has a long history of racial violence, including the forced removal of black residents in the early 1900s. Even today, white supremacist groups maintain a stronghold here, and billboards with racist messages have been spotted as recently as 2024. Economically, black residents have virtually no opportunities. The median income for white households is $68,500, but black residents earn just $19,200 on average. the Black unemployment rate sits at 21%, with most employers openly favoring white job applicants. Many Black professionals report outright discrimination when applying for jobs or housing in the area. Education is another major issue. The town's schools are over 96% white, and Black students who do attend often face racial bullying. Teachers and administrators rarely intervene, creating a hostile learning environment. Funding disparities are severe, with Black students in surrounding areas receiving $7,200 less per student than white students in Harrison. Housing discrimination is aggressive. Only 18% of Black applicants are approved for home loans, compared to 81% of white applicants. Black renters are often refused leases, forcing them to live in neighboring towns or endure substandard housing conditions. Police harassment is common. Black residents are 6 times more likely to be stopped by law enforcement, and hate crimes have risen 28% since 2024. Many Black residents report feeling unsafe walking alone at night, as racial slurs and intimidation tactics are frequently used by locals. Harrison continues to be the epicenter of racism in the United States, with white nationalist groups deeply embedded in the community. Despite national attention and local activists pushing for change, the town remains one of the most unwelcoming places for Black Americans.